A mom called CPS on me for teaching my daughter to wash her hands for 20 seconds, claiming it was OCD behavior and water waste. She'd been stalking us since my husband rejected her advances at back-to-school night. She even showed up at my job with a megaphone and created a website with photos of parents she'd been secretly taking for weeks. A parent at my daughter Penelope's school called CPS because I told her to wash her hands. Linda had been gunning for me all year. She reported me for arriving too early at pickup. She complained my parking was aggressive. All of this because 1 year ago, my husband rejected her advances after she cornered him at back-to-school night with her hand on his chest, asking if he ever got lonely while I worked late. He removed her hand and said he should go find me. She'd been on a mission to make my life hell since. I just documented everything and ignored her. But when Penelope won the Health Hero Award for washing her hands, and Linda's son didn't, she went nuclear. Your daughter is wasting water. Linda cornered me after pickup. 20 seconds of hand washing is excessive. It's practically OCD behavior. That's the CDC recommended time, I said. Linda's son had been nominated for the same award, but lost after a teacher caught him leaving the bathroom without washing his hands. Instead of addressing that, Linda decided my autistic daughter was the problem. The principal called me in. Linda is concerned about water usage and possible mental health issues, she said, looking embarrassed. I would have just ignored her like always, but there was one problem. I'm a water treatment engineer. I literally calculate municipal water usage for a living, and there was no way I was letting that bitch win again. I pulled out my phone and showed her the CDC guidelines. 20 seconds is the medical standard. It uses less than a gallon of water. I know it's ridiculous, the principal said, but she's getting other parents involved. She demanded a school board meeting. The meeting was packed. That psycho beach Linda came prepared with printouts about water conservation and mental health statistics she'd found online. We're in a water crisis, she announced. She glared at me. When I mentioned I was a water treatment engineer and that 20 seconds only used half a gallon, she rolled her eyes. Credentials don't matter when we can see the waste happening, Linda shot back. That's when the district facilities supervisor stood up to defend me, but I told him to sit back down. I'm sorry, everyone. I then turned directly to face Linda. After taking everything in, I realized you're right. Suddenly, a huge smirk was plastered across her face while she nodded approvingly. Yeah, no kidding, she laughed, but I just let her have her moment. Because in the midst of all the water drama, I remembered something. Linda was going through a divorce. She was unemployed, and everyone had seen her kid line up in the free food queue during lunch. And at the end of the day, I didn't want to make her life worse. Better to wave the white flag. We all filed out after that, and everyone on my side apologized to Linda for going against her. When I got home, my husband showed me a message on his phone. It was from Linda. She told him all about what had happened, and worded it in a way that made her seem like an innocent little girl. We both laughed at her, and he blocked her. I think that was my husband's 5th rejection of her LOL. I thought that was that, until the next day. Because at 9 a.m., I woke up to CPS banging on my door. 2 caseworkers stood there with a police officer. My daughter came downstairs for breakfast and asked why the police were there. The caseworkers insisted on inspecting our home immediately. When they were finished investigating, they all had an extremely confused expression on their faces. The report claimed we were starving our daughter, keeping her locked in the basement, and that my husband was inappropriately touching them during forced washing rituals. The whole investigation took 6 hours while my daughter missed school and I missed work. If it wasn't for some quick thinking, I would have lost my kid. It was pretty obvious that Linda was behind it all, but I didn't want to point fingers until I had some concrete evidence. And the next day, I got it, because I was picking my daughter up from school when I heard an annoying voice speaking behind me. I turned around to see Linda, bragging about how she had put me in my place. The moms beside her looked concerned, but I ignored them. Oh, I didn't even notice you standing in front of me. Her voice dripped with self-righteousness. Guess I better come clean about yesterday. My bad. I really did think your husband was well, you know. After all, he did end up with someone like you. She then cackled like a witch who would have been burned alive at the Salem witch trials, but I just let her, because she was missing one crucial detail. I'm not the kind of bitch who falls apart when pushed. I'm the bitch who gets strategic. The next morning brought more harassment. Linda showed up at my workplace, a municipal water treatment facility 20 minutes from the school. Security called me down to the lobby where she stood arguing with a guard about her right to speak with employees. I walked past her without acknowledgement, but she followed me outside to the parking lot. She waved papers in my face, some kind of petition she'd created overnight. I kept walking to my car while she ranted about water conservation and proper parenting. When I drove away, she stood there screaming at my taillights. That afternoon at pickup, 3 mothers approached me separately. Each one whispered that Linda had been calling them all morning, trying to recruit them for some kind of intervention. One mother, Catherine, looked particularly uncomfortable. She mentioned Linda had asked for their home addresses to send information packets about childhood OCD. I thanked them for the warning and continued documenting everything in my phone. Screenshots, timestamps, witness names. My engineering brain treated it like a project requiring careful data collection. The harassment escalated quickly. Linda started showing up wherever I went. The grocery store, the gas station, even outside my gym. She never approached directly, just watched from a distance while texting furiously. Other parents began noticing her behavior. Several mentioned seeing her car parked outside the school for hours after dismissal. My husband suggested we file a restraining order, but I had other plans. Linda's divorce was messy, according to the school gossip network. Her ex had primary custody of their older son, and she was fighting for more time with the younger one. Financial records were public in custody disputes. I knew where to look. The following week, Linda organized a water awareness meeting at the community center. She sent invitations to every parent in our grade, complete with misleading statistics about hand washing and mental health. The flyer featured a stock photo of crying children next to dry riverbeds. I attended the meeting. Linda had set up a PowerPoint presentation filled with cherry-picked data and emotional manipulation. She spoke passionately about protecting our children from obsessive behaviors disguised as health consciousness. Several parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. When When she finished, I stood up calmly. I didn't argue or defend myself. Instead, I asked if anyone had questions about our local water system. A few hands went up. I spent 20 minutes explaining how our treatment facility worked, how we monitored usage, and how residential consumption compared to industrial use. I used simple terms and real numbers. No emotion, just facts. Linda tried interrupting several times, but the other parents were genuinely interested. One father asked about his water bill. A mother wondered about filter systems. By the end, we'd shifted from Linda's attack to a productive community discussion. She left fuming. The next day, she filed another CPS report. This time, the complaint alleged educational neglect. She claimed I was forcing Penelope to complete excessive homework related to water systems. The caseworker who visited seemed embarrassed to be there again. She apologized while checking Penelope's homework folder, which contained normal second-grade assignments. The investigation lasted 2 hours. Penelope missed her art class, which she loved. Watching her disappointment sparked something cold and calculated in me. Linda had crossed a line by repeatedly weaponizing a system meant to protect children. I started my research in earnest. Public records revealed Linda's financial situation was worse than anyone knew. The divorce had drained her savings. She'd been denied spousal support due to evidence of infidelity. Her part-time marketing job had ended 6 months ago. She was 3 months behind on rent. Court documents from her custody battle were illuminating. Her ex-husband's lawyer had raised concerns about her pattern of false accusations against authority figures. There were incidents at her older son's previous school. A teacher accused of discrimination. A coach reported for imaginary safety violations. Always unfounded. Always disruptive. I compiled everything into organized folders, not to attack her, but to protect myself. The pattern was clear. Linda targeted people who threatened her ego. My husband's rejection had triggered her fixation, but her behavior suggested deeper issues. Meanwhile, her harassment continued. She convinced 2 parents to request Penelope be moved to a different class, citing concerns about behavioral influence. She started a Facebook group called Parents for Responsible Water Use that quickly devolved into personal attacks against me. The principal called me in again. This time, she looked exhausted. Linda had filed formal complaints with the district about the school's hand-washing policy. She demanded all teachers time student hand-washing. She wanted water flow restrictors installed on all faucets. She'd even suggested bathroom monitors. The principal showed me emails from concerned teachers. Linda's son had been caught bullying younger students. There's something really strange about Linda targeting a water engineer over hand-washing when she clearly has bigger problems like being 3 months behind on rent. Makes me wonder if this whole crusade is just her way of avoiding dealing with her actual life falling apart right now. When confronted, Linda had accused the reporting teacher of targeting her family. The pattern was escalating beyond just me. I shared some of my documentation with the principal. Not the financial records or court documents, just the timeline of harassment. The principal's expression shifted from exhausted to alarmed. She hadn't realized the scope of Linda's behavior. We agreed to monitor the situation carefully. The principal would document all interactions. I would continue keeping records. Neither of us wanted to escalate, but we needed protection. That weekend, Linda made her biggest mistake. She approached Penelope directly at the Saturday farmers market. My husband had taken her while I worked overtime. Linda knelt down and told Penelope that mommy has problems and sometimes adults need help being better parents. Penelope, confused and upset, ran to find her father. By the time he reached the spot, Linda had vanished. But 3 vendors had witnessed the interaction. One had filmed it, thinking it was strange to see an adult corner a child. My husband called me immediately. I left work and met them at home. Penelope was quiet, processing what had happened. We explained that some adults say confusing things when they're upset, and she hadn't done anything wrong. That night, I made a decision. Linda's behavior was escalating toward dangerous territory. Her financial desperation, combined with her pattern of false accusations, created a volatile situation. I needed to be strategic, not reactive. I spent Sunday organizing everything. The timeline, the witnesses, the documentation. I created backup files and shared them with my husband. We installed security cameras after noticing Linda's car driving past our house multiple times. Monday morning arrived with another surprise. Linda had convinced a local reporter to investigate water waste in schools. The article didn't mention me by name, but quoted Linda extensively about parents who encourage obsessive behaviors. The reporter hadn't fact-checked any of her claims about water usage or CDC guidelines. The article spread through parent social media groups. Most people recognized Linda's vendetta, but some newcomers took it seriously. I started receiving messages asking if my daughter really washed her hands for minutes at a time, as Linda had claimed. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I focused on patterns. Linda's attacks came in waves, usually triggered by financial stress. Rent was due. Her custody hearing was approaching. Each escalation coincided with pressure in her personal life. The school implemented new protocols quietly. Teachers were instructed to document any unusual parent behavior. The front office started logging all complaint calls. Security footage retention was extended. Nobody said Linda's name, but everyone knew why. Catherine, the mother who'd warned me earlier, became an unexpected ally. She'd experienced Linda's wrath the previous year over a birthday party invitation mix-up. She shared her own documentation, revealing more patterns of harassment I hadn't known about. Together, we identified 6 other families Linda had targeted over 3 years. Always the same pattern: perceived slight, escalating harassment, false reports to authorities, attempted social isolation. Most families had simply switched schools or activities to escape. I was the first to stand my ground. The breaking point was approaching. Linda's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. She'd been banned from the school Facebook group for posting photos of my car with aggressive captions. She'd tried to organize a boycott of a fundraiser I was helping coordinate. Her son had started repeating her lies to classmates, causing playground conflicts. I maintained my strategic silence while building a comprehensive defense. Every interaction was logged. Every witness was noted. Every false claim was documented with contradicting evidence. My engineering mindset treated it like system failure analysis. identifying root causes and potential solutions. The situation had evolved far beyond a simple parent conflict. Linda's desperate attempts to control the narrative were failing. Other parents were beginning to see the pattern. Teachers were growing concerned. Even her few remaining allies seemed uncomfortable with her escalating tactics. As I prepared for whatever Linda planned next, I focused on protecting Penelope from the adult drama. She continued washing her hands properly, proud of her Health Hero award. She didn't need to know about the chaos one bitter woman had created over such a simple, positive behavior. The foundation was set. Linda had revealed her playbook through repetitive attacks. I'd mapped her patterns, documented her escalations, and built a network of aware observers. The next phase would require careful execution, but I was ready. Strategic thinking had always been my strength. Now it would be my weapon. I reviewed the court documents Catherine had shared with me. Linda's pattern stretched back years, always targeting mothers she perceived as threats. The documentation painted a disturbing picture of escalating behavior that administrators had repeatedly dismissed as personality conflicts. Catherine met me for coffee while our daughters attended dance class. She spread out printed emails and screenshots across the table. Linda had targeted her after Catherine's daughter won a reading competition. The harassment started small but escalated to false accusations about Catherine's parenting. She'd eventually transferred her daughter to avoid the conflict. I took photos of everything. The similarities to my situation were striking. Linda always started with minor complaints, then escalated to authority figures, then attempted to turn the community against her target. Catherine mentioned 2 other mothers who'd left the school under similar circumstances. My phone buzzed with a text from another parent. Linda was in the school parking lot, approaching cars during afternoon pickup to distribute flyers about water waste awareness. The flyer featured my name prominently, along with misleading statistics about hand washing and mental health. I arrived at pickup to find chaos. Linda stood near the entrance, pressing flyers into parents' hands. Some accepted politely, others tried to avoid her. The principal watched from the doorway, clearly frustrated but unable to intervene on public property. Linda spotted me and raised her voice, announcing to everyone about the water crisis our children faced. Parents glanced between us uncomfortably. I walked past without engaging, collected Penelope, and left. Behind me, Linda continued her performance. That evening, my husband showed me Linda's latest social media posts. She'd created an entire narrative about wealthy families wasting resources while others struggled. The posts carefully avoided naming me directly, but included enough details that everyone knew her target. Comments ranged from supportive to skeptical. I screenshot everything and added it to my growing file. The documentation now filled 3 folders on my computer, meticulously organized by date and type of incident. My engineering training proved useful for creating systematic records. Penelope came downstairs upset. A classmate had told her that his mom said we were bad for the environment. The playground drama had begun. I comforted her while internally noting another escalation in Linda's campaign. My husband suggested we consider private school, but I refused to let Linda drive us away. We'd done nothing wrong. Penelope loved her school, her teachers, her friends. Running would only embolden Linda to target someone else. I spent the evening researching Linda's background more thoroughly. Social media revealed a pattern of conflicts at previous jobs, former friendships that ended badly, and family members who seemed to keep their distance. The divorce documents I'd found earlier were just the tip of the iceberg. Catherine texted me late that night. 3 more mothers had reached out to her after seeing Linda's parking lot performance. They'd all experienced minor run-ins with Linda, but hadn't realized the pattern. We arranged to meet as a group. The next morning, Linda escalated again. She arrived at school during morning drop-off with a clipboard, asking parents to sign a petition for responsible water usage policies. Most parents hurried past, but a few stopped to listen to her practice speech about conservation and mental health. I watched from my car as she worked the crowd. Her son stood beside her, looking uncomfortable as she loudly proclaimed her concerns about certain families teaching children obsessive behaviors. Other children stared as they walked past. Inside the school, I overheard teachers discussing the situation. They'd been instructed not to engage with Linda's campaign, but were growing frustrated. One mentioned that Linda had been calling the district office daily, demanding policy changes and investigations. The principal caught my eye and nodded toward her office. Inside, she showed me a stack of complaints Linda had filed. Water usage, mental health concerns, educational priorities, even parking violations. Each complaint required documentation and response, consuming hours of administrative time. I shared my timeline of events with the principal. Her expression grew more concerned as she recognized the escalating pattern. She made copies of everything and promised to share it with the district's legal team. During my lunch break, I met with the group Catherine had assembled. 5 mothers sat around the table, each with their own Linda story. One had been targeted over a PTA position, another after her son was chosen for safety patrol over Linda's. The pattern was consistent and disturbing. We compared notes and timelines. Linda's attacks followed a predictable cycle, intensifying around her personal stressors. Looks like Linda's created her own little hate group, except she's the only member and everyone else is just trying to avoid eye contact. Nothing says I'm totally stable, like passing out angry flyers in a school parking lot. Her custody hearings were scheduled for next month. Her financial situation was deteriorating. The pressure was building. One mother, Rachel, mentioned she'd kept recordings of voicemails Linda had left during her harassment campaign. The messages started reasonable, but devolved into rambling accusations and threats. We listened, recognizing the same escalation pattern. I suggested we compile our documentation collectively, not to attack Linda, but to protect ourselves and future targets. Everyone agreed. We created a shared digital folder, carefully organizing evidence of Linda's pattern of behavior. That afternoon, Linda appeared at the school library where parent volunteers were preparing for the book fair. She cornered the volunteer coordinator, demanding to know why she hadn't been invited to help. The coordinator, aware of Linda's reputation, politely explained that volunteer spots were full. Linda's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. She accused the coordinator of discrimination, of forming cliques, of teaching children exclusively exclusionary behavior. Other volunteers exchanged knowing looks as Linda stormed out. I received a call from my supervisor. Linda had contacted my workplace again, this time filing a formal complaint about my unprofessional conduct in discussing water usage at school events. The complaint was baseless, but it required a formal response. My supervisor, familiar with my work and reputation, dismissed it quickly, but the fact that Linda had escalated to attacking my professional life marked a new level of harassment. I documented the incident and informed my company's HR department. The school book fair arrived amid tension. Linda set up an unauthorized table outside school property, distributing pamphlets about water conservation and mental health resources. She'd positioned herself where every family had to pass. Parents navigated awkwardly around her table. Some accepted pamphlets to avoid confrontation. Others walked wide circles to avoid her entirely. The atmosphere was uncomfortable, with children picking up on the adult tension. Inside the book fair, several parents approached me quietly. They'd grown tired of Linda's disruptions. One father mentioned he'd started documenting her behavior after witnessing her corner a teacher in the parking lot. The community was beginning to unite against the disruption. Penelope selected her books happily, unaware of the drama outside. I was grateful she remained insulated from most of Linda's campaign, but I knew that protection wouldn't last if Linda continued escalating. That weekend, Linda made another strategic error. She appeared at a community soccer game where many school families gathered. Armed with flyers and her clipboard, she worked through the crowd, disrupting conversations and games. Parents began actively avoiding her. Groups would disperse when she approached. Children noticed their parents' discomfort. The soccer league president eventually asked her to leave, citing rules about solicitation at youth events. Linda argued loudly, claiming her cause was too important for bureaucratic rules. Families packed up and left early. The disruption to a community event marked a turning point in public opinion. Even her few supporters seemed embarrassed. I maintained my strategy of documentation without engagement. Every incident was recorded, witnessed, and filed. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Linda's desperation was driving increasingly erratic behavior. Monday brought a new development. The district sent a formal letter to all parents about maintaining appropriate boundaries and following proper channels for concerns. While Linda wasn't named, everyone understood the message. Linda responded by creating new flyers claiming the district was suppressing important health information. She positioned herself at various school entrances throughout the week, rotating locations to avoid being asked to leave. Teachers began reporting that Linda's son was struggling. His grades were dropping, and he'd been in several playground conflicts. When teachers tried to address it with Linda, she accused them of retaliation for her advocacy work. I felt sympathy for her son. He was an innocent victim of his mother's obsession. Teachers did their best to shield him from the situation, but children are perceptive. He knew his mother's behavior was causing problems. The principal implemented new security measures. Visitors now needed appointments. Volunteer positions required background checks and approval. Door access was restricted. Again, Linda wasn't named, but everyone understood why. Linda's financial situation worsened. Catherine heard through the school grapevine that Linda had received an eviction notice. The stress was manifesting in increasingly aggressive behavior. She'd been seen crying in her car after failed attempts to rally parents. I consulted with a lawyer friend about our options. She reviewed my documentation and confirmed we had grounds for a restraining order, but she also warned that legal action might escalate Linda's behavior further. We decided to wait. The custody hearing approached, and Linda's behavior became more frantic. She created a blog about corruption in education and wealthy families silencing advocates. The posts were unhinged, mixing legitimate concerns with paranoid accusations. Parents started sharing screenshots of the blog in private groups. The posts revealed Linda's deteriorating mental state. She saw conspiracies everywhere, believed the entire school system was aligned against her, and painted herself as a martyred advocate. I focused on protecting Penelope from the fallout. We maintained normal routines, attended school events, and didn't discuss Linda at home, but I could see the stress affecting my daughter. She'd become quieter, more cautious around other parents. Catherine organized a meeting with the principal and several affected parents. We presented our collective documentation, showing Linda's pattern across multiple families over 3 years. The principal looked overwhelmed by the scope of the problem. The district's legal team got involved. They reviewed our documentation and Linda's history of complaints. While they couldn't take direct action against a parent, they could implement policies to protect students and staff from harassment. New guidelines were announced. Parents who repeatedly filed unfounded complaints would be restricted to written communication only. Those who disrupted school events would be banned from campus, except for picking up their children. The policies were neutral, but clearly targeted at Linda's behavior. Linda responded predictably. She accused the school of silencing parents and threatened legal action. She created new social media accounts when her original ones were blocked. She recruited her few remaining allies to file complaints on her behalf, but the community had reached its limit. Parents openly discussed Linda's behavior at school events. Teachers felt empowered to document incidents. The school board received letters supporting the new policies. Linda's isolation was nearly complete. I continued my strategic approach. Every action was defensive, never offensive. I protected my family while letting Linda's own behavior drive her downfall. The engineering principle of allowing a flawed system to fail naturally was proving effective. The custody hearing arrived. Linda's ex-husband's lawyer had somehow obtained some of our documentation, showing her pattern of harassment. The judge expressed concern about Linda's behavior affecting her son's well-being. Linda lost additional custody time. The court ordered a psychological evaluation and parenting classes. The decision devastated her, but it was a consequence of her own actions. Her campaign against me had ultimately hurt her own case. She blamed me for the custody decision. New posts appeared on her blog, now naming me directly. She accused me of orchestrating a conspiracy to destroy her family. The posts were clearly defamatory, but I chose not to engage legally yet. Instead, I focused on healing our school community. Parents who'd been afraid to participate in events began returning. The tension that had permeated pickup and drop-off started to ease. Children played together without their parents' conflicts interfering. Linda's presence at school became sporadic. Financial pressure forced her to find work, limiting her time for harassment campaigns. When she did appear, parents gave her wide berth. Her influence had evaporated completely, but I knew this wasn't over. Linda's pattern showed she didn't give up easily. She would likely regroup and find new ways to attack. I maintained vigilance while hoping she would focus on rebuilding her own life. The school year was ending soon. Award ceremonies and celebrations approached. I wondered if Linda would attempt to disrupt these final events. Her son deserved to enjoy them without drama, as did all the children. I prepared for whatever came next. My documentation was complete. The community was aware. The school had protections in place. Most importantly, Penelope had weathered the storm with minimal impact. She still washed her hands properly, still felt proud of her Health Hero award. The strategic approach had worked so far. By refusing to engage directly, by letting Linda's own behavior expose her true nature, by protecting rather than attacking, I'd managed to defend my family while maintaining my integrity. But the final confrontation was approaching. Linda's desperation, combined with her pattern of escalation, suggested she would make one last dramatic attempt to vindicate herself. I needed to be ready for whatever form that took. The other parents and I maintained our communication network. We shared information about Linda sightings and new developments. The collective vigilance provided security and support. We'd formed an unintended community through shared adversity. Why is Linda setting up unauthorized tables and making her own flyers about water conservation when she's facing eviction and custody battles? Something doesn't add up about her priorities right now. Most people would focus on keeping their home and child, not disrupting soccer games with clipboards. As summer approached, I reflected on the journey. What started as petty harassment over hand washing had revealed deep dysfunction and systematic problems. Linda's behavior had forced positive changes in school security and policies that would protect future families. The cost had been high: stress, lost time, worried children, disrupted community events, but we'd survived. More than that, we'd learned to stand together against bullying behavior, even when it came from adults who should know better. The next chapter was about to begin. Linda's lease was up. Her custody arrangement was under review. Her reputation in our community was destroyed. She faced a choice between accepting responsibility and changing, or finding new targets elsewhere. I suspected she would choose the latter. People like Linda rarely changed. They simply moved their dysfunction to new venues. But our community was now prepared. We had systems in place. We knew the warning signs. For now, I focused on the present. Penelope's end-of-year celebration was coming. She'd grown so much despite the challenges. Her confidence in doing the right thing, like proper hand washing, hadn't wavered despite an adult's campaign against it. That resilience gave me hope. Children could weather adult storms when properly protected. Communities could unite against disruptive individuals. Systems could be improved through difficult experiences. Even Linda's harassment had ultimately strengthened us. The final confrontation loomed, but I felt ready. My strategic patience had paid off. The documentation was complete. The community was aware. The school was protected. Whatever Linda planned for her last stand, we were prepared to weather it. The ending was near, but not yet written. Linda still had moves to make. I still had a family to protect. The chess match that began with hand washing would conclude soon. But for now, I waited, watched, and remained ready for whatever came next. The end-of-year awards ceremony arrived on a humid Thursday morning. I watched Linda enter the auditorium 20 minutes late, her movements jerky and aggressive as she pushed past seated parents. She'd lost weight since the custody hearing. Her clothes hung loose, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Catherine nudged me and pointed to the program. Linda's son was receiving an attendance award. At least he'd have one positive moment despite everything. I focused on Penelope, who sat with her class near the front, occasionally turning to wave at us. During the ceremony, Linda stood up 3 times to take photos, blocking other parents' views. The principal made eye contact with security, who moved closer to Linda's row. She noticed and sat down, but her agitation was visible in her constant fidgeting and loud whispers to anyone who'd listen. When they announced the Health Hero Award recipients, including Penelope's continued recognition, Linda's face contorted. She half stood, then caught herself and slumped back down. Parents nearby shifted away from her. The tension in her section was palpable. After the ceremony, families gathered in the courtyard for refreshments. Linda cornered the new district superintendent near the juice table. I watched her animated gestures and his increasingly uncomfortable expression. He excused himself after 2 minutes, but Linda followed him toward the parking lot. Security intercepted her at the gate. The conversation appeared heated. Linda pulled out her phone and started recording, shouting about her rights. The superintendent drove away while security firmly guided Linda back to the courtyard. Several parents filmed the interaction on their phones. I collected Penelope and prepared to leave, but Linda positioned herself by the exit. Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I changed direction, taking Penelope through the side gate instead. Behind us, I heard Linda's frustrated exclamation. That afternoon, my phone exploded with notifications. Linda had posted the security video on multiple social media platforms, claiming discrimination and harassment. She'd tagged the school, the district, and even the state education department. The comments section quickly filled with confused responses from people unfamiliar with her history. Catherine forwarded me screenshots from a private parent group. Someone had created a comprehensive timeline of Linda's behavior over the past year, complete with dates and witnesses. Parents were adding their own experiences in the comments. The documented pattern was overwhelming. By evening, Linda's posts had backfired spectacularly. Several parents publicly responded with their own videos and documentation. One mother shared security footage of Linda following her to her car. Another posted voicemails Linda had left at 2 a.m. The evidence mounted faster than Linda could respond. The next morning, Linda appeared at school during drop-off with a megaphone. She stood on the public sidewalk, perfectly legal, shouting about corruption and conspiracy. Her son walked past her with his head down, clearly mortified. Other children stared and whispered. The principal made an announcement over the intercom about maintaining a positive environment for our students. Teachers quickly ushered children inside. inside. Parents formed a human barrier between Linda and the entrance, not confronting her but simply standing quietly with linked arms. Linda's shouting grew more frantic. She accused specific parents by name, including me, of orchestrating her downfall. Her voice cracked as she described losing custody, being evicted, and facing financial ruin. The raw pain in her voice was uncomfortable to witness. A police cruiser arrived, summoned by concerned neighbors rather than the school. The officer spoke calmly with Linda, who eventually lowered the megaphone. She gestured wildly while explaining her situation. The officer listened patiently, then suggested she move along. Linda complied but promised to return. Inside the school, I met with the principal and several other affected parents. We discussed options for protecting the children from further disruption. The principal revealed that Linda's son would be transferring to his father's school district the following week. At least he'd have a fresh start. That afternoon, Linda's ex-husband arrived during pickup. I'd never seen him before, but his exhausted expression told the whole story. He spoke briefly with the principal while Linda watched from across the street. When he emerged with their son, Linda started toward them, but he quickly loaded the boy into his car and left. Linda stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the car disappear. For a moment, her mask of righteous anger slipped, revealing raw grief underneath. Then she spotted me watching, and the mask snapped back into place. She pointed at me and mouthed something I couldn't hear. The weekend brought an unexpected development. A former colleague of Linda's reached out through Catherine. She'd worked with Linda at 3 different companies over the years and had witnessed similar patterns of behavior. She offered to share her documentation if it would help protect the school community. I met with the woman at a coffee shop. She spread out emails, HR complaints, and termination letters spanning a decade. The pattern was consistent, but escalating. Linda had blamed coworkers for conspiracies, filed false complaints, and created hostile work environments. Each job had ended badly. The woman explained that she'd stayed silent out of pity, but seeing Linda target children had changed her mind. She'd already submitted a statement to the school district's legal team. Several other former colleagues were prepared to do the same if necessary. Monday arrived with news that Linda had been formally trespassed from school property. The letter, delivered by certified mail, outlined the legal consequences of violating the order. She could still pick up her son from the designated area, but couldn't enter campus or attend school events. Linda's response was swift and unhinged. She created a website dedicated to exposing the conspiracy against her. The site featured photos of parents, including me, with our names and accusations listed below. Some photos appeared to have been taken from considerable distances, suggesting she'd been surveilling us for weeks. The school's legal team moved quickly. Cease and desist letters were sent. The hosting company was contacted about terms of service violations. Parents documented everything for potential restraining orders. The website lasted less than 48 hours before being shut down. Linda pivoted to standing on various street corners near school families' homes, holding signs about corruption and child abuse. She never technically trespassed, staying on public property, but her presence was deeply unsettling. Several families reported her to police, who could only warn her about harassment laws. The situation reached a crescendo when Linda appeared at the school district's monthly board meeting. During public comment, she launched into a rambling speech about water conservation, false CPS reports, and parental rights. Board members listened stone-faced as she exceeded her time limit. When security approached to escort her out, Linda pulled out a stack of papers, throwing them into the air. They were copies of her evidence against various parents. As papers fluttered down, she shouted about justice and truth before being firmly guided outside. The local news picked up the story, but not in the way Linda had hoped. The report focused on school security measures and the importance of proper channels for parental concerns. Linda wasn't named, but anyone familiar with the situation recognized the references. Parents rallied to support each other through the final days of school. We organized walking groups for pickup and drop-off. We shared information about Linda sightings. We made sure no family felt isolated or vulnerable. Linda's megaphone meltdown is peak main character syndrome. Imagine thinking the whole school district is plotting against you because you couldn't handle a kid washing her hands properly. The community bond forged through adversity was unexpectedly strong. Linda's final attempt came during the last day school picnic. Despite the trespass order, she appeared at the adjacent public park with a banner and flyers. Security monitored her closely while families enjoyed the celebration on school grounds. Her isolation was complete as she stood alone, ignored by everyone. I watched her from a distance, seeing the toll her obsession had taken. Her son was gone, transferred to his father's custody. Her home was lost to eviction. Her reputation was destroyed, all because she couldn't accept rejection and responsibility for her own actions. The picnic continued despite her presence. Children played games, parents chatted, and teachers celebrated the year's end. Penelope won a prize in the 3-legged race, her joy untainted by adult drama. Life moved forward around Linda's static anger. As families began leaving, Linda packed up her banner. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by her own choices. Several parents had mentioned she'd be moving out of state to stay with relatives. The chapter was closing on her time in our community. I loaded our picnic supplies while Penelope said goodbye to friends. Summer plans were discussed, play dates arranged, normal life resuming. The year's trauma would fade into memory, leaving only the lessons learned and bonds strengthened. Catherine approached as we prepared to leave. We didn't need words to acknowledge what we'd been through together. The shared experience had created an unexpected friendship. Our daughters ran ahead, laughing about something incomprehensible to adult ears. The parking lot emptied slowly as families departed for summer adventures. Linda's car was gone from its usual observation post across the street. The school would be quiet for months, free from drama and disruption. September would bring new families, new dynamics, new challenges. I buckled Penelope into her seat and closed the door. The year had tested us in ways I'd never imagined, but we'd survived intact, our values unchanged. Penelope still washed her hands properly, still took pride in doing the right thing. The drive home was peaceful. Penelope chattered about summer camp and swimming lessons. Normal childhood concerns filled the space where tension had lived for months. I smiled at her enthusiasm in the rearview rearview mirror, grateful for her resilience. That evening, I archived my documentation files, hoping never to need them again. The folders contained hundreds of pages chronicling one woman's descent into destructive obsession, but they also documented a community's strength and solidarity in protecting its children. My husband and I sat on the porch after Penelope's bedtime, processing the year's events. We'd weathered false accusations, harassment, and social warfare. Our marriage had grown stronger through the trial. We'd learned to trust our instincts and protect our family without compromising our values. The next morning brought the official start of summer vacation. Penelope burst into our room at dawn, excited about endless possibilities. I made pancakes while she planned adventures. The simple domesticity felt precious after months of conflict. A text from Catherine confirmed Linda had left town. The moving truck had been spotted at dawn, loaded with whatever remained of her life here. Her forwarding address was in another state, far from our community. The relief was palpable, but tinged with sadness for her son. Summer routines quickly established themselves. Swimming lessons, library visits, playground adventures. Penelope thrived in the drama-free environment. Her natural joy and curiosity flourished without the shadow of adult conflict. She remained blissfully unaware of how close we'd come to real danger. I returned to work full-time, grateful for the normalcy. My colleagues had been supportive throughout Linda's harassment campaign. The water treatment facility felt like a sanctuary of logic and order after months of irrational chaos. Numbers didn't lie or manipulate. The school district implemented new policies based on our experience. Parent concerns would be addressed through formal channels with clear documentation requirements. False reports would result in immediate restrictions. Security measures were enhanced without making the school feel like a fortress. Our parent support group continued meeting monthly. What began as mutual defense evolved into genuine friendship. We shared resources, organized activities, and maintained vigilance against future threats. The bonds forged in crisis proved durable in peace. By August, Linda had become a cautionary tale whispered among parents. New families were quietly warned about the importance of documentation and boundaries. The hard-won wisdom was passed along to prevent future victims. Her legacy was one of improved awareness and preparation. School supplies appeared in stores, signaling summer's end. Penelope excitedly selected folders and pencils for third grade. Her enthusiasm was untainted by the previous year's trauma. Children's resilience continued to amaze me. They moved forward while adults carried scars. The week before school started, I received an unexpected message. Linda's ex-husband thanked me for the documentation that had helped protect his son. The boy was thriving in his new environment, free from his mother's toxic influence. He'd started therapy to process the trauma. I felt genuine relief for the child. He'd been an innocent victim of his mother's obsession. At least he now had a chance at normalcy. His father seemed committed to providing stability and healing. Sometimes the best outcome was escape and distance. The first day of school arrived with typical excitement and chaos. New teachers, new classmates, new possibilities. I watched Penelope bound into the building with confidence. She'd grown taller over the summer, but her enthusiasm for learning remained unchanged. The pickup routine felt different without the underlying tension. Parents chatted freely without scanning for threats. The atmosphere was lighter, more communal. We'd survived our trial by fire and emerged stronger. The shadow had lifted from our small community. I noticed several new families navigating the pickup process. They looked overwhelmed but excited. I remembered that feeling from before Linda's campaign began. I made a point to welcome them, offering guidance without mentioning the previous year's drama. Catherine and I had coffee while our daughters attended their first dance class of the new year. We talked about normal things like homework and activities. Linda's name didn't come up once. The past was truly past. We'd moved beyond survival mode into genuine friendship. The Health Hero Award continued with new recipients. Proper hand washing was celebrated without controversy. The simple act that had triggered so much conflict was restored to its rightful place as basic hygiene education. Penelope proudly mentored younger students in proper technique. September ended with a traditional fall festival. Families gathered to celebrate community and harvest. The event proceeded without disruption or drama. Children played games while parents volunteered at booths. Normal life had fully resumed its rhythm. I watched Penelope race through the obstacle course with friends, her laughter carrying across the field. She'd maintained her sense of self throughout the ordeal. Her autism hadn't been weaponized against her. She remained proud of who she was and what she'd accomplished. The year's journey had taught valuable lessons about standing firm against bullies, documenting everything, and finding strength in community. We'd learned that strategic patience could defeat aggressive harassment. Most importantly, we'd protected our children while maintaining our integrity. As autumn settled over our town, I felt profound gratitude. We'd faced a genuine threat and prevailed through collective action and careful planning. The experience had revealed both the worst and best of human nature. In the end, community and compassion had triumphed over obsession and hatred. Life continued with its normal rhythms: work, school, activities, family time. The extraordinary had given way to ordinary, and I was deeply grateful. Penelope grew and learned and played, unmarked by the adult conflict that had swirled around her. We'd successfully shielded her innocence while defending our family. The strategic approach had worked exactly as planned. By refusing to escalate, by documenting meticulously, by building community support, we'd defeated a determined adversary without becoming like her. We'd won by being exactly who we were, good parents protecting our children. Looking ahead, I knew other challenges would come. Life guaranteed obstacles and conflicts, but we'd proven our ability to face them with wisdom and strength. The community bonds forged in crisis would endure. We were prepared for whatever came next. For now, though, we simply lived. Homework and bedtimes, meals and milestones, the thousand small moments that make up a childhood. Penelope washed her hands for exactly 20 seconds, proud of her Health Hero Award, unaware of the battle fought in its name, and that's exactly how it should be. Thanks for sticking with me through all that. Seriously, what a ride. I'm still kinda side-eyeing half of it, but hey, sometimes the questions are more fun than the answers. Until next time, stay curious out there. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. comment. I love reading all your comments.